Hello! I'm excited for this one. If I'm excited about it, I put a little exclamation point because sometimes the thing that the tutorial is about isn't actually what it's about. It's about the techniques used to make that thing. But if I was like, hey, I'm excited about the math node, most people would see that and be like, math? I'm not going to click on that. It's like, no, do it. It's I think it's going to be fun. It covers some stuff we've kind of talked about in the past with like self-randomizing props and things, but in a much easier and more powerful way. And I think we're going to be covering a lot of ground. So I made this shot last night. This is my friend Brian Lewis. This is just the default idle animation that I uploaded a little bit ago. I want to actually give it, you know, make everything a little bit more, give them a newspaper and animate these guys too. This is Andy and Michael in the back here. But what's carrying a lot of the weight of this scene is obviously all of these lights flickering, and yeah, going off into this next shot here too. The idea is that like every day, you know, everybody goes off to work on this giant structure, and in the evening all these little taxis and kind of like, you know, people movers drop them off back here, and all the little guys in the rickshaws and pedicabs like pick them up and take them back into town. But the thing I was having trouble with is I'd modeled a couple bikes, and they you know, I modeled like 3 versions, and each one had its own blinking neon, but they were all blinking in sync, and so like all, you know, a third of the cabs would all suddenly blink pink, and it was really obvious that they were all in sync, and that wasn't what I wanted. But I also didn't want to like have a completely new instance of the geometry. I didn't want to actually have to model. Right now I'm just linking these in. I linked in the 3 bikes from a different project, and I didn't want to actually have to have, you know, 50 different bikes in the scene. I want to just use my 3 bikes over and over and have them like randomize on the shader level, so the neon would just be different for every single bike, which is a great way to render a big complicated scene like this without like being too taxing on your memory. Also, the original version I did of this like LED reader board was done in the absolute silliest way possible, where I actually rendered out a giant image sequence of all of these words, you know, animating to the left, and I couldn't even play back the scene in Eevee because it was trying to load in all of these JPEGs for this video texture, and it's like, it's just a still image moving to the left. Why did I use a video texture for that? So we're going to be going into what I did instead, which was make this guy, and every time we duplicate it, it's a different version of a scrolling sign, and it's just that easy. And so you can like make like a storefront or a little car or whatever, and just every time you duplicate the entire storefront, it randomizes enough so you don't get that copy and paste feeling, which is cool. But real quick, just want to show you, this is my friend Brian Lewis, and I just scanned him last night in the new and improved photo scanning setup I have set up right here. I finally have some lights coming up from below, which makes the lighting a lot more even, which means it looks a lot more like he's kind of placed in the scene. Still haven't even done a de-lighting pass on him or anything like that. But the thing I'm excited about is, normally, you know how their heads, if people have hair in a photo scan, it looks like they're kind of wrapped in a nasty, you know, cling film plastic bag or something. I tried a really basic hair particle system on his head, super easy to set up, and it adds so much depth to his head and the silhouette and all of that. And so at some point, if people are interested, I can walk through that. It's just a basic, you know, hair particle system, but yeah, I'm pretty excited about that. Okay, try and take 2 here. Information delivery in film, it's called exposition. Information that you want the audience to know so that they can understand the plot. And if Michael Caine walked out at the very beginning of the film and he's like, the Boohoo Gang, I'm so bad at present. The Boohoo Gang is a shadowy organization that is that has these values and all of this stuff, you'd be like, okay, Michael Caine, I don't really have any reason to care. However, if Brendan Fraser's family has been murdered slowly over the course of an hour, and he's like, who's killing my family? And then Michael Caine walks out and he's like, the Boohoo Gang is a shadowy organization. Then the audience is on the edge of their seat, like, tell us, Michael Caine, everything you know about the Boohoo Gang. And that's kind of my rule for exposition, is don't answer a question that the audience is not already asking. And the exact same thing happens with tutorials. Ideally, you run into a problem and then it's like, how do we get around this problem? Let's do that. As opposed to what I'm about to do, which is, these are some ways to get around problems you don't know exist yet. So let's let's begin. So the general gist is I'm taking the reader board and I'm projecting it onto one of these rows, then I'm using the shader nodes down here to offset it and scroll it around on any of these 16 rows, or displace it up onto a different line, which means I'm randomizing a whole lot of stuff, and randomization can be kind of tricky. So that's going to be our first task. We are going to make a great little randomness node that'll just provide a totally unique number that we can use both in here, and that will also change every time we duplicate the object. And that's more complicated than you might think, because computers hate randomness. Here, if we open up the shader editor here and create a new material here, let's turn this into an emission shader. And a lot of you probably know about the object info random input. Here, let's hit Shift A, input object info, and if we plug the random into the color and go to rendered, every time we duplicate this, it's going to be a different color. And that's because the random input provides you with a random value between 0 and 1. And if you plug that straight into emission, black is mapped, 0 is mapped to black, and 1 is mapped to white. And it's kind of helps to visualize it if we plug a color ramp into the middle here. So now you can see, 0, 1, but we can also remap those values so that now everything below, this like 0.5 is going to be black, and that becomes more obvious if we duplicate it like this. Of course, this is not actually a random value. This is computers don't know how to really do random values, but what they do know how to do is take one number and jitter it around and pop out like a different number that seems effectively random. But you always need to have that input number that it sticks in there. It's a randomness algorithm, and if you plug in like 1, it'll go 25, and you go, okay, cool. If you plug in 2, it'll be like 13. If you plug 2 in again, it'll still be like 13. It's always going to give you the same value for 2. And so the big question comes: how do you get that seed to change, really? And in this case, the place where it gets the seed is the object's name. Here, if we go to the object properties here and we change this to like some other value, this changes. Not always perceptively, but yeah, that is a thing to keep in mind. Okay, so let's say we want to randomize the color. Here, I'm going to create a color ramp with different colors on it. We'll make it kind of some blues. Okay, and if we plug this into the factor and drag the color out, now and drag the color out, now each cube will be a random color. And that's because, say it gives 0.2, it's going to go to 0.2 on here, be like, oh, it's blue, okay. And if the value it gives is like 0.75, it's going to go here and be like, okay, cool, it's kind of like a pink peach color. And you might also think like, okay, we'll do the same thing, but we'll randomize the strength too. Yeah, and drag this like that. However, there's something that's happened here that maybe you can't tell right off the bat, but that's that all of the blues got dark and all of like the pinks and peaches stayed nice and bright. And that's because this is only providing one value. If it provides like 0.2, that's going to be, here blue, but it's also going to be down here in the darker area. And the same if it's like 0.9, it gives you, this kind of orange color. That's also going to be brighter, and that's always going to happen. You're always going to get that same spot in the color ramp, which means it's not true randomness. So what we need to do is we need to have a different random input go into here, and one way to do that is by using white noise. And I'm going to make this one-dimensional and just drag the value down here, and this is just another randomness algorithm. If we put in a random value, it's going to give us another random output between 0 and 1. But you'll notice it has a different issue, and that's that it is only giving us one singular value across all of the different objects. Like all of these are changing in unison. So this gives a random value per object. This can give you a secondary random value, but it's going to be the same across all objects. And so what we want to do is make this value different for every single object, so they'll all be a different intensity. And we can just plug this straight into here, and now all of them have a different intensity value and a different color, and there isn't that pattern, where all the blues are dark. But that leads us to our next issue. So in the scrolling reader board, I had like 13 different randomized values. But if we duplicate this and we want to do the exact same thing again here, and we drag this down in here, this white noise texture is getting the exact same seed into both of these. So it's always going to give the exact same output, which means if I drag this over, it's going to be exactly the same. However, if we just change this input just the tiniest little bit, the white noise texture is going to take that and spit out a completely different number. So we just need to figure out how to change this. I'm going to throw a math node in there, and if we do this and add literally any value into here that isn't 0, it's going to give us a different output. And here you can see now it's a different value. And so wouldn't it be cool if we could just package this all together and just have that as a little randomness generator? Yeah, we can actually do that real easy. Here, I'll just duplicate this. I think it's just ready. I'm going to hit Control G, and that turns it into a group. And if we tab out, you can see right now we just have this little thing. It doesn't have any inputs or outputs, it just exists. But we can say, hey, the value that we want to add to randomize it, let's make that the input, and we'll make our value of the white noise texture the output. And if we tab back out, you can see we can change this, and it'll put out a random number whenever we want that'll change in every single object. So instead of having to do all of this stuff, we can just drag this in here and give it a random value. We can drag this down here, give it a random value. And this is also a really nice way to keep everything from becoming node spaghetti. You just do have to remember to give this some random number. Very, very cool. In fact, this is so handy, I think I want to keep this around all the time. So I'm going to hit this side panel here, and under properties, I'm going to call this my randomness. Yes, and now if I want, I can just hit Shift A, group, and make my randomness appear right there. In fact, and I know I'm talking a whole lot about the Boohoo Gang without really getting into the Brendan Fraser side of things, but I want to have this node group every time I open Blender. I just want to be able to hit Shift A and have randomness appear. I've done this before, so I have a different group here. But we can do that really easily. Here, I'm going to save this project. Randomness, yes. And I'm going to open up the default startup file, which I do just by going File, New, General. And you can see I've already done this. I have my new and improved butt cube. First thing I want to do is I want to bring in the node group from my other project. So File, Append. Here's the project, open it up, node tree, and here is my randomness. So when you bring an image texture into Blender or create a material or something but don't have it used in any objects, eventually Blender realizes like, hey, I'm holding on to all this data that you're not actually using. And after you save Blender a few times, it'll just kind of delete it and be like, yeah, you're not using this. If we just bring this node group in here but we don't have it applied to a cube or anything, Blender will eventually get rid of it because it's not being used. If we check fake user, that's saying, hey, no, there's actually somebody using it, don't ever delete it. And so we're gonna check this. And now every time we open up Blender, if we're in the shader editor, we can just hit Shift A and we will have our, we have to have be in a material, but we can hit Shift A and we'll have our randomnesses here. This is obviously take 3. And Ian from the future here, I forgot to say the most important part, which is after you do that, you have to go File, Defaults, Save Startup File. And whatever state this is in right now with the render settings, or if you have different preferences or whatever, you can set them, and it'll always just open up exactly how you want it with those node groups, involved and all of that stuff. I just saved this file with this panel open here. I might join it back open and make this here. We'll just save over that. There we go. So now this is my startup file with the node groups and everything. So now that we can create randomness whenever we want to, here I'm going to delete this cube. Let's create the content for the reader board. I'm going to create a camera here, Alt-R to get rid of the rotation. I'm going to bring it up and make it orthographic to get rid of the perspective. And actually, let's make it square too, just to make our lives easier. It'll just be 1920 by 1920. Hit O to go in the camera view, and I'm going to change the scale of the camera until we have, like, I don't know, maybe, how many is this? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 12 rows here. And it's important to kind of line this up a little bit because that's going to be the basis of how this all works, is all of these rows need to be equivalently spaced. Now we just put our text in here, and we'll create a bunch of different rows of text saying whatever we want, and I've already done this right here, although for mine I didn't use the world space grid. I actually modeled my own thing, which is also useful if you wanted to make like a grid of different logos or something, and it'll randomly grab a logo or whatever, but I'm getting ahead of myself. Okay, so we have this. I'm gonna grab one of these and make sure, give it an emissive material so it's just really nice and bright. Maybe even make that 2. Gonna go under the world properties and make it black. And now if I just hit F12, we'll render out this image. And it doesn't matter if it has a alpha channel, really, because the alpha channel is just either 1 or 0, and also if you render it on black, it's going to be, either white 1, black 0. Alt-S to save this. We just call it, scrolling words. Yes, save that. Now let's make the reader board we're going to actually put the words onto. So here, I'm going to hit Shift-A, create a plane, tab into edit mode, and I'm going to scroll it out to about the dimensions I want. I'm going to use Control R and scroll up to add a bunch of new edge loops here. Each one of these is going to be a column of bulbs. Left click to apply. I'm going to do the same thing here, but these will be, you know, rows of bulbs. You can see what we're doing. Maybe fix the dimensions a little bit here. I'm going to hit X and go down to deleting only edges and faces, which will leave me only with all these points. Tab back into object mode, and under modifiers, I'm going to go to skin. And it looks like it's just made it a big rectangle, but if we go tab back into edit mode and hit Control A, we can change the scale of the skin modifier. You can see it's just applying geometry around every single point. We can also so we can dial in kind of how we want things to look a little bit. I like that. We can also apply a bevel modifier and tweak the amount so that everything's kind of spherical. In fact, let's make all of these just bigger. I think it'll read better. Cool. And if we apply these, there's a lot of ways to make a grid, you know, an array of spheres like this, but this was just one I thought was kind of fun. Right click, shade smooth, and now it kind of looks like an LED reader board thing. Let's give it a material and figure out how to put those words on there. And let's call it scrolling sign material. Cool. Slide open the shader editor here. And I have the node wrangler turned on, so I can just select this and hit Control T, and it'll automatically hook up an object, you know, an image texture and mapping nodes here. By default, it goes into base color, but we actually want it to go down into emission strength, and we will load in our image. Scrolling words, yes. And it's doing a thing, but we can't see anything. Here, let's go into rendered view, and that's for two reasons. The first one is that the emission color is black, and so that's, you know, it's just glowing black. Let's make it kind of a more reader board color. And the second reason is because we haven't said how this is going to be using the image texture yet. So here, let's slide open another panel, go to UV editor, and open our scrolling words here. In edit mode, I'm going to select everything and hit U, project from view, and now we get to see. Look at this. This is it here on our image. I'm going to scale it down and line it up with one of the rows somewhere. It doesn't even really matter where I do this. You can see right now the texture sometimes is like, it has the aliasing, the anti-aliasing stuff here. Like there's feathered bulbs, which doesn't make any sense. Ideally, they're only sampling, they're either on or off, not, you know, the bottom third of the bulb is on. We can fix that so easily by changing the pivot to individual origins and hitting S and just scaling everything down so it's only sampling one tiny spot. And there we go. Now it's a little bit. We still have a little bit of like feathering here, which we can fix later if we really want. Actually, looking at this, I want this to be longer. Here I'm going to tab back into edit mode, duplicate all of this, and like line it up to make it twice as long. And here, let's select everything and hit U, project from view, and yeah, now we just have a longer version. And you can tweak this at any time. You can change the shape and just reproject it, and everything else should just play nice with it. But yeah, there we go. And now we actually can animate it if we want to. Here, let's tab into edit mode, and you can see if we move the way it's placed on the image around, that makes the words look like they're moving on the reader board. We can get that same effect by offsetting the mapping using the mapping node here. Like if we move this, it's basically just offsetting the values that this is mapped onto the image. And you can see the exact same thing here. If we offset this one, you know, it can change it on the other axis too. And I could just hover over this and hit I to add a keyframe, maybe go 100 frames later, offset it, keyframe it in this value too, and now you can see it, you know, it'll like go between the two keyframes. In fact, if I select this node and the object, you can see those keyframes down here on the timeline. And if I hit Shift E, linear extrapolation, it'll just keep going forever. However, I want to be able to play with this value. I want to be able to speed it up and slow it down and have it kind of go at different frame rates and stuff. So I don't want to keyframe it right in here. I want to do it with a value node. So here, let's create Shift A value, plug that in there, and do the exact same thing. You know, hit I, add a keyframe, go to 100 frames later, offset it, add another value here, select the node and the object, Shift E, linear extrapolation, and it'll just keep doing this forever. However, as you've probably keenly noticed, it's moving at a diagonal, and that's because location only has one input here, but it has three values, x, y, and z, which means all of the different coordinates are being offset by this amount. But we only want it to be affecting the x. So I'm going to hit Shift A, converter, combine x, y, z, which is kind of a silly node that just basically lets you plug in things individually into these three axes. Plug that into that. And now we can plug this just into the X, and there we go. Now finally we get to the actual fun stuff. So I've got this picture of Josh Truax here mapped onto this image, exactly the same as the reader board stuff. And just like that, if we change this location on X, you know, it slides around horizontally. But you'll notice it starts at 0, and as we move up, by the time we get back to exactly 1, it's back in its original place, which means the values between 0 and 1 represent every possible location that this image can be, you know, on the plane. 0 and 1, why, that's what our randomness generator makes. So if we go back to our reader board image, you can see this value here is effectively just pushing the image across. What if we add on a random value to that between 0 and 1? I'm going to hit Shift-A, group, randomness, use a math node here, stick it right in between, and we'll add this to this. Make sure we put a random value in here, and it doesn't look like it did anything different, but every time we duplicate this, it's going to be at a different place along that row, which is pretty cool. Okay, but all of these are just still sampling this same row, and we have 16 other rows. Can we easily make it, like, use a different row? Yes, surprisingly easily. So right now this is just playing with the, you know, the X value. Here, let's move all of this. We want something to go into the Y. If I create a, or I'll just duplicate this randomness node and change the value. If I plug this into Y, it's gonna randomly place it, you know, somewhere. It's going to offset it, but you'll notice it's not actually lined up with the rows. It's just kind of like picking a random place. And that's where I'm crazy excited that the math node has a snap feature. Here I'm going to hit Shift-A, add a math node here, and change this to snap. And you can see already it's done something. And what it's done is it's snapping everything to the closest increment, which is either going to be like 0 or 0.5, which means it's either going to be like on this one, or it's going to be offset halfway up the image and lined up on a different one. However, there's 16 rows, so let's just put in 1 divided by 16, and that gives us the decimal representation of that. And now it's randomly selecting one of the 16 rows on every single one and randomly offsetting the location somewhere, you know, along that row for each individual one. That's very exciting. And actually, I want to touch on this just a little bit longer because I did a whole tutorial about this before, and I made it way more complicated than it needed to be. Okay, so let's say you have a storefront and you have a sign in the window, and every time you duplicate the storefront, you want to have the sign change. So all right, I'm going to hit Control-T, load in the signage. Here we go. And it's actually using an alpha channel, so I'm just going to plug the alpha down here into the alpha channel. Nice. I'm going to select this and hit U, project for view, and just line this up with, you know, one of these here. Ideally, I want to fill. You can see I'm doing a, like, what is it, 6 by 2. So I wanted to fill that rectangle pretty darn well. Do our combine, you know, XYZ thing here. Pow, and use our random input. I'm running through the whole thing right now, just so you can see it's like it's pretty darn easy. Stick it into X, stick it into Y. We're going to use our math converter thing here, and just divide it by the number of things in that row. So here we'll go snap by 1 divided by 6, and we'll do the other axis as 2. So it's just 1 divided by 2, 0.5. And so now each one will just, you know, line up so great. And that's just, this is so much easier than the nonsense I was doing with all the color ramps. And so I just wanted to kind of drive that home. And an even more future and sleepier Ian here. I almost forgot. Remember, if you use the same randomness for both things, you're going to end up with that synchronicity, which is why not all the logos appear. So we just have to use a math node here. And we're going to add in the values from our whatever randomness group we have going on here. Drag this to random thing, and now all of these should actually be appearing. Just remember that. But let's keep going. Okay, so this is the value that's providing all the animation. Let's right-click on it, and let's just call this, you know, the source. What if we want to randomize the speed value? Here, let's create another randomness here. And remember, this is giving us a value between 0 and 1. If it's 1 times this, it'll just be going the original speed. And if it's like 0 times this, it wouldn't be moving at all. If it's 0.5, it would be moving half speed. Let's see if it actually works. Converter, math, multiply by this. Remember to change this value to something wacky. And now each one is moving at its own speed. We might not like the ones that are going really, really slow, so we can remap this range. I'm going to add a converter map range here, and it's going to go from 0 to 1 to, like, let's say 0.5, you know, half speed to like maybe faster than usual, 1.2. And so now none of them are going all that slow. Some of them are even going faster than usual. Okay. But you can see, if we look at this, every single sign is updating on every single frame. And if you've ever watched a reader board before, sometimes they have great frame rates, but a lot of times they'll also be like chung, 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 chung. And wouldn't it be cool to randomize the frame rate? We can do that really easily too. So here's where we're randomizing, you know, its speed. Let's go after that, add another math node here. And I'm gonna change this to snap. And now it's just gonna snap to various increments. Right now it's just like 2. It's like either, you know, 0 or halfway across the image. But if we change this increment to like 0.02, then they all play kind of stumbling like this. And remember, we can always take our random node, change the value, you know, something not used before, plug that in, and this is probably gonna be a little bit funky. Yeah, because most of the increments are way too big, so they don't update very often. But we can use our map range node here, and we're going to say, okay, you're giving us a value between 0 and 1. We're going to map that to something like 0.00 and like 0.02. Hey, now that's looking pretty cool. And we're making some node spaghetti. Should we clean it up? Should we clean it up? No, we're not going to clean it up. We're just going to tuck it away and never think of it again. Okay, next let's randomize the color, and I think you guys already know how we're going to do this. We're going to use our little randomness node, give it a random value, plug it into the emission here, and so now all of them will probably just be, yeah, different shades of gray. But if we plug that through our color ramp and make these different colors, and right now it's kind of a gradient, but we can change linear to constant, and now each one will just have its own place here, which is cool. You can see we've just made each one is going to have its own different color. So right now this thing works because we're plugging a black and white image into the emission strength. Black means the light is off, and white means the light has a value of 1. But 1 isn't particularly bright as far as like emissive shaders go. So let's make that brighter. We can use a math node here. There we go. And multiply it by whatever value we want. If we want it to be, you know, 5, we'll just multiply 1 by 5, and now it's 5 times as bright, which is extra cool if we check bloom, and it's like, ooh, yeah. If we want to randomize this value, you're getting it. You know what we're doing, more randomness, plugging it in there. But right now this is just giving us a random value between 0 and 1, so we're going to remap that range to be whatever we want, maybe 1 to like 7 or something, and now every single one has a different intensity. And actually here, let's go up and change, let's make the base color a little bit darker. Yeah, and turn up the specular and turn down the roughness so that actually kind of reads as like, you know, little reflective LED bulbs. Okay, and what if we want some of these to change color randomly over time in kind of like an RGB LED rope type way? So this is where our colors are coming from. Remember, these are the ones deciding which color are happening. I think here I might make them a little bit more yellow. And it's easy enough to add a hue saturation node here, and then we can offset all of the colors. In fact, if we add a keyframe here, and then go to later, we offset the hue a little bit. We're gonna just do our usual thing. Add another keyframe, select this, select one of these, Shift E, linear extrapolation, and now all of them will change color for all time. But we don't want all of them to change color. We only want some of them to change color. So I'm going to add a mix RGB node here, and one of the inputs is gonna go through the hue and saturation input. The other one is just going to go straight in there, so it is not going to be having its hue shifted at all. You can see if we go to 0 here, it is going to be color changing. If we go to 1, they all stay the same color. And you might be thinking, okay, well then we're just going to add our randomness node into here, except that would just result in a random, you know, value between 0 and 1, which means it would always kind of look mixed together and kind of gray like this, like it's half color changing, half staying steady. So we're actually going to use this, remember, change the value, to control probability, kind of. We're going to plug this in, yeah, but we're also going to use a color ramp here. Pow! And we're going to make it constant, and that means it's either going to be putting out, you know, if it's below 50%, it's going to give straight black. If it's above, it's going to give, you know, straight white, which is either 0 or 1, so it's going to be clamped to either always changing color or not changing color at all. And if we slide this in one direction, none of them will be changing color, and if we slide it the other way, if the number will end up in the black, and it will change colors. So we can control the probability of that like this. But yeah, this is a really handy thing to have in mind. If you have a mixed node like this and you have two different inputs, this setup right here will serve as a probability, generator of like, all right, what are the odds that it's doing, this one thing or it's doing the other thing. If we want to get nuts, we can make one of them strobe, and the way we would do that is we would set up a color ramp like this, just going black, white. Okay, so we have our color ramp going, black, white, black, white, black, white. We can go distribute stops evenly, which will spread them all the way across, and then go constant. You see we've now broken up into even divisions of effectively, 0 and 1, off and on. And okay, this is where it doesn't get any more complicated, but it does, the nodes are starting to get messy, and that's starting to kind of weigh on me. But yeah, so these are all of the values. All of this stuff we set up is just going into the strength, and you can kind of imagine, okay, well, if we multiply this by, 0 and 1, that would result in the lights either being off or multiplying by 1 and being, whatever this value already is. First thing though, we don't want all of them to blink at once. So here, let's make some space here. Drag all of this over, and let's copy down our little probability controller here. And here's the strength. I'm going to plug two versions of this into the mix node, and plug that all the way through into the emission strength. And we are going to mess with one of these, make one of these blink, and make the other one not blink. And so let's see here. If I use a math node and just multiply whatever's coming out of here by whatever's coming into here, we'll just either leave it unchanged or it'll be 0, which right now isn't going to do anything because we haven't actually put any input into this. This isn't outputting anything because it has nothing to transform. So we're going to create a value node here, plug it into here, and we're going to do exactly what we've been doing, which is create a keyframe here, go later, create another keyframe, poof, Shift E, linear extrapolation. A lot of people ask why I don't do the little trick where you hit like, pound frame, and that'll always just put in, the frame number as the value, which can be a nice way of getting like, linear information. And that's for two reasons. The first one is I actually like having it set up like this. It kind of like gives you a speed slider a little bit. You can just slide around. And the other one is drivers don't update, in the shader editor, don't update on every frame from what I've been finding. The difficulty that we run into with this is that this value is always going to be going up linearly for eternity. Whereas this color ramp, if you're not between 0 and 1, it has no idea what to do. And so what we want this to do is basically just keep cycling up between 0, 0, and 1. And fortunately, the math node has our back again. Here, let's go converter, math, put that in there. And if we go to a fraction, it's just going to use the decimal part of the number. So this front number can be going up. It's ignoring that. It's only ignoring the point, or it's only using the point whatever after the fact. And if we hit play, you can see it is blinking, but very, very slowly. So we're going to bring these keyframes closer together so it goes a little bit faster here. In fact, let's make it a little bit too fast, because you know what we're going to do next. At this point, converter, math, multiply it by our little randomness thing. Change the value to something wacky, plug that in there, and now every single one that is blinking will also be blinking at a different speed. That's pandemonium. Let's control the probability here that it'll be blinking. There. Now only a couple of them are blinking. A couple of them are randomly changing colors. They're all moving at different speeds and different frame rates. They're all using different rows at different locations on the rows. What else? What else do you want them to do? Nothing. This is as much as we should probably make them do. That's cool though. And I always just think it's so cool to have like just one single object like this. Like, especially once you get the asset manager in Blender ready, where you just have one sign. You can just bring it into your scene. You're like, cool. All right, let's just set up a whole bunch of signs. And remember, still, like we can grab this and here, I'm going to shift duplicate it so I have a new thing here. Tab into edit mode, duplicate all of this, kind of line it up, and here we'll just bring this over too, and then we have, it's just longer. It's really easy to work with. Or we could get fancy. We'll grab this middle bit here, turn on proportional editing. Where is it? There we go. And we can like have it arch over a a doorway or whatever. That's fun. And if you look at all the neon tubes here, that's just you know, the strength turning off and on with all the stuff we just did. It's just not, you know, worrying about having the image texture moving across it. And just to tie it all together, here's a little storefront I just put together using everything we were just talking about. And you know, everything animates and turns off and on. And if you want, you can create another storefront, and it'll randomize a whole bunch of stuff, the name of the store and the, you know, the inside, and all just using everything we were talking about here. Although the fact that every single neon thing is kind of going is maybe a little bit too much, so I might turn down the probability that any given neon sign will actually be on. And there we go. That feels slightly less kind of copy and pasty. But yeah, I like it. Thanks for watching. I will talk to you soon. Okay.